Imagine you walk into Bugsy's gym, and you're forced to fight in a double battle in order to reach him. You figure it would be an easy sweep since they're all going to be bug types, right? Well, what if they brought in an Articuno? Or maybe you'd think the Team Rocket grunts inside Slowpoke Well would be a clean sweep since they're essentially just fodder to level off, right? Nope. How about the box legendary itself? This is Pokemon SoulSilver, but I randomize encounters, trainer Pokemon, movesets, and one more special feature that we'll get to later, so stay tuned for that. Before we get into today's video, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button as it helps me out a lot. Let's try to hit 500 subs soon. Anyway, without further ado, let's explain the rules of this challenge. I must try to catch the first Pokemon of each route I pass by unless there's a duplicate or comes from the same evolution line. If I fail to catch the first Pokemon, I can no longer use that route and we must move on. No items in battle, hell items are okay, and no overleveling. One more thing, if anyone were to faint, we can no longer use them for the remainder of the run. Let's get started. We name ourselves JC Kaya as always and start off in New Bark Town, where Professor Elm allows us to choose between 3 Pokemon, Exeggutor, Torkoal, and Snowball. All pretty bad options, but since movesets are completely randomized, I could get some crazy coverage if I was lucky. I eventually settled on Exeggutor and named it Palm. There's going to be a naming theme throughout this video, so try and guess it in the comments down below. After attaining our starter, we go through the standard beginner items, like talking to our mom as she willingly sends out her 10-year-old to fight creatures that could cause major bodily harm, and get Professor Elm's number. We're told to head over to Cherry Grove, and on the way we get into some encounters. Since we don't have any Pokeballs yet, our route catching rule hasn't taken effect, but we'll be getting some soon. Inside Cherry Grove, an old man hands over his musty running shoes, allowing us to speed up this journey just a tiny bit more. We head north of Cherry Grove and reach a singular house. I don't know why anyone would want to live out in the middle of nowhere, but to each their own, I guess. Oak Tree gives us the Pokédex, which we'll be filling out very sparingly as we head back to New Bark Town. We get into our first rival fight as he sends out Nidoking. We just exchange hits back and forth, and I get back inside the lab where we're told to identify a thief. We name him Chrono, which isn't part of the naming theme by the way. Anyway, after a little more filler including how to catch a Pokemon, it's time for a couple encounters, starting at Route 29. We ended up finding a Manaphy, which is pretty crazy. We lowered its health down pretty well, and somehow I ended up sleeping it, which I'm not entirely sure how that happened. We threw one Pokemon, and I magically ended up catching it. I name it Bisky and head over to Cherry Grove to pick up some Pokeballs, as we have another encounter over in Route 46. It ends up being an Infernape, which is an absolute powerhouse. After a little struggle and yet another mysterious sleep, we catch it, naming it Gone. Just above Cherry Grove is Route 30, where we encounter Charizard. Unfortunately, I forgot Outrage leaves the user confused, and I bring it down low enough so that it KOs itself with confusion. We really lost the strong Pokemon. Next up is Route 31, where Miss Magia shows itself. In between it having a recoil move and it chunking me down, I knew I couldn't catch it without losing a Pokemon, so I just used Shadow Ball to knock it out. We're running low on Pokeballs, so I figured I'd stop by Violet City to get some cash and take on the Bellsprout Tower. There wasn't any notable battles, but our encounter ended up being a Swampert. I have no idea what's going on, but we're running into a lot of third form starters, which isn't a bad thing I suppose. We name it Moral and head out of Bellsprout Tower after beating the old man at the top. There are a few more encounters we can get before entering Falkner's gym, and we start off with the Ruins of Alph. After solving the puzzle, we get into an encounter with Lantern. I tried to lower its health since we don't have a lot of Pokeballs to spare, but we ended up fainting it. I promise guys, I'm not doing this on purpose, I'm just really bad at this game. We head over to Route 32 and find ourselves a Wobbuffet, which I do end up catching to everyone's surprise a bit, and I name it Nov. Our final encounter before Falkner is inside Dark Cave, and we run into a Beautifly, which somehow manages to use up all of our Pokeballs, so yet again another failed. This is a very one-sided catching spree, which is not entirely my fault, but what can you do? With that, it's time for our first gym leader. We enter Falkner with a level cap of 13 and I go with Moral out first. He sends out a Mothim and we conveniently have Braid Bird for it. He sends out a Delcatty and leads with the Mega Horn, leaving me relatively low. I didn't want to risk losing Moral to recoil from another Brave Bird plus damage taken, so I swap over to Gone to use Wing Attack, leaving Go with a sliver of HP. She uses a super effective Psycho Cut, leaving me on 18 HP, but I finish things off with one more Wing Attack. A pretty close fight. After the gym, we head over to the mart to pick up the egg, which is not Togepi in this case, so we'll be keeping it in the party until it hatches. Our next stop is Azalea Town, but we have a few encounters to make. Inside Union Cave, we encounter a Gardevoir, a crazy good special attacker, assuming we can get any moves on her. Luckily, we were able to catch it and name it Elena, letting us move on to Route 33 where we encounter a War Turtle, yet another starter. We struggle to catch it for a bit, but eventually we add Colt to our team. We take on Slowpoke Well, where we catch a Kingler who I named Sub. The actual grunts themselves were pretty easy, aside from the Lugia, since we didn't have any super powerful moves, and it's just a really defensive Pokemon. With that being said, it's time to fight Bugsy with a level cap of 17. He leads with a Pinsir, which is pretty ironic, and I lead with Gone. I go for a Wing Attack and it crits, leaving Pinsir in the yellow. It heals up back with a Citrus Berry, and uses the barrier to defend. One more Wing Attack from Gone and it goes down. Next up is Gliscor, and I decide to leave Gone in. I go for a Seed Flare, doing about half of his HP, and it hits back with a Dragon Claw. One more Seed Flare does the trick, and our last Pokemon is Ghastly. With 2 more attacks, the second badge is ours. A pretty good sweep. On the way to Goldenrod, we have a few places we can visit for some encounters. Inside the Elex Forest, we pick up a Shieldon named Wolfen, a Ledian named Hina on Route 34, and a free Pineco named Kenya, another one that isn't part of the naming thing. Just like that, we're already at the 3rd gym leader Whitney, with a level cap of 19. Our first Pokemon, believe it or not, is Lugia. Again. With this box legendary, I just can't seem to escape it, and we have a pretty bad matchup as I lead with Gone. I use Seed Flare and it does a ticklish amount of damage, and I use Thunder Wave to slow it down. It kept using Follow Me, and eventually it hit me with a Shadow Sneak. I swapped over to Mortal as it hit me with a Shadow Sneak. I used Dizzy Punch and I'm still doing next to no damage at all. I followed up with a couple of Mist Balls and eventually knocked it out with one Brave Bird. Her next Pokemon was a complete joke compared to first, as I knocked Grimer out with 2 dives. By the way, I unironically did a Grimer solo run, so if you want to watch something after this, go ahead and check it out, it helps me out a lot. With the 3rd gym completed, I Critique is up next. We stop by to pick up a Shedinja in Route 35, a Dratini in National Park, and finally in Route 36 we get this. Our first real legendary Pokemon, Mewtwo. Now the hard part, actually catching it. It was a huge struggle as I had to swap between Pokemon so it wouldn't KO them, but we managed to catch it inside of the Ultra Ball. I'm really glad we stocked up inside the department store. I name it Meruem, a fitting name for a creature like this. Anyway, we still have 2 more encounters, so let's take care of them. We get a Togetic in Route 37, and an encounter with Heatran inside the Burn Tower. Unfortunately, it struggled itself to death, and we couldn't catch it in time, but that's alright since having Meruem on our team makes up for it big time. It's time to take on the 4th gym leader Morty with a level cap of 25. He sends out Ditto first, and I lead with Moral and go for a dive. He tries to hit me with an Iron Tail, but I dodge it since I'm under the water. I land a hit, bringing him down to a slur of HP, and he misses another Iron Tail. He heals up as I go for a Dizzy Punch, doing a little over half his HP. One more Dizzy Punch and Ditto goes down. He brings out Floatzel next, and hits me with the Shadow Sneak since he's faster. I return fire with the Mist Ball, but then it does next to no damage. Floatzel goes for a quick attack, and I mix it up using a Dizzy Punch, and it leaves him confused. He hits himself in confusion as I land one more Dizzy Punch to knock him out. Next is Bebro, and I go for a dive, dodging a Giga Drain and doing a decent amount of damage. Upon returning, Moral gets hurt with a critical 4 times super effective Giga Drain and goes down to 10 HP. I quickly switch to Meruem and go for a Luster Purge, bringing him down to yellow. Another one finishes the job and he brings out his last Pokemon, Weasel. It also goes down to 1 Luster Purge and we get our 4th gym badge. Not too bad of a fight, but we did almost lose a member. It's time for some new encounters. Route 38 gave us a Snow named Podungo, Route 39 with an Entei named Mike, Route 40 with the Electivire which I named Killua, and finally a Haunter named Sadaso. Oh, and an egg finally hatched. It was a Blastoise, and even though it would be nice to use on our team, considering it's level 1, I don't feel like it's worth training all the way up for, so it'll probably be boxed. With these encounters done, we take on Chuck with a level cap of 31. He leads with a Tailo as I bring out Meruem. I use Luster Purge and he one-shots the Tiny Bird. His next Pokemon is out, and it's the one and only god Bidoof. But even gods fear ants. With 2 Luster Purges and after getting licked to oblivion, we get our 5th gym badge. Immediately after, we fight Jasmine. With a level cap of 35, she sends out Togetic first, and I lead with Gone. I go for a wing attack, and it doesn't do a whole lot as it hits us with a present. I use Swords Dance to raise my attack, and it hits me with a powerful dynamic punch, leaving me with half HP and confused. I figured I'd take a gamble and still use wing attack. We use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus 5 wing attacks, and eventually goes down. Alakazam gets sent out, and I take a risk, and I hope he doesn't have any actual psychic moves. I go for a wing attack, but it outspeeds me and uses extrasensory, one-shotting Gone and giving us our first death. I send out Meruem and go for a Shadow Claw as it charges up a Solar Beam. We do a pretty good amount of damage and follow it with one more, but it hits us with the power of the sun, bringing our health to 41 HP. Alakazam goes down, and she sends out her last Pokemon, Nidoran female. With 1 Luster Purge, it finishes the job, and we have the 5th gym badge. If you know anything about SoulSilver, you know the next few sequence of events is extremely mind-numbing. It's none other than a Team Rocket side quest. But before all that, let's go over some encounters. We have a Dragonite named Neon in Mount Mortar, a Wailmer named Leech on Route 42, a Licky named Porcupine on Route 43, and finally a shiny Floatzel inside the Lake of Rage named Baze. We head over to the underground rocket base where we need to power down this Pokemon, and in the meantime catch a Chinchou named Flutter. The only other thing worth mentioning is the double battle with Lance, as he sends out a Bronzong instead of his iconic Dragonite. And this guy is completely useless as he spams Glare on whoever isn't already paralyzed. We just use Meruem and Sweep Through, giving us a pretty easy rocket quest. Next up is the 7th gym leader Pryce with a level cap of 34. He sends out a Scyther and I lead with Meruem. I use a Luster Purge, dealing about half, and it uses a pretty weak Shockwave. I swap it up with Zen Headbutt and it goes down to red. One more Zen Headbutt does the job and he sends out a Dratini. One Luster Punch brings it down to a sliver as an ominous wind breezes past us. One Zed Headbutt finishes the job, and its last Pokemon comes out. I use Luster Purge again, but it doesn't do a whole lot. I forget he's a Psychic type, so I use Shadow Claw, but not before he lowers my speed. He has Citrus Berry, so he heals back up a bit and decides to lock in the fight, but one last Shadow Claw gives us the win. I'm starting to see how one-sided this is, as having a Mewtwo this early on is kind of a cheat code, but let's continue. We have to head over to Goldenrod to finish the rest of the Team Rocket shenanigans, and there wasn't too much happening, just mindless battling. We quickly defeated Petrol at the top, freed the guy locked in the basement, and then got the Silver Wing upon whooping Archer at the top. So with all the filler out the way, let's head over to Blackthorn and pick up some of our final encounters on the way. Route 44 gives us a Cradily, to which I named Worm. Ice Path gives us a Pachirisu named Koala, and Route 45 gives us a Swablu named Machi. With that, it's time to fight Clair with a level cap of 41. She sends out a Shift Tree and I lead with Moral. I go for a Brave Bird, leaving her on a sliver HP, but I know she'll heal up, so I go for another Brave Bird as it uses Mind Reader. One more Brave Bird finishes the job and she sends out Winkle. I'm on pretty low HP, but I take a risk and I figure I can just outpower her using Surf. One of them deals about a third and she returns fire. I use Surf again, but this time it's a crit and I knock it out. Third out is Donphan, and I figured I should just switch over to another Pokemon to be safe. But I stick it out and use Dive, hoping for a one-shot, but I bring it down to a third of its HP. We retaliate with a Side Beam, and I miraculously survive on 1 HP, and one Surf knocks Donphan out. Her last Pokemon, her ace, is Luxray, and now I actually have to switch over. I bring out Meruem as I tank an Aqua Jet. I essentially just spam Luster Purge until we get our final batch. I think it was quite a fitting battle, considering if you know who Moral is and how that battle played out. Inside the Dragon Den, we find ourselves a Gible, and I name it Blaster. We go through the test with the old man and pass it with flying colors, making Claire extremely jealous. We get a call from Professor Elm, and we pick up our Master Ball. He tells us that there are Kimono girls waiting for us at Eggerty City, and this is typically where the unexpected can happen, as fighting 5 consecutive battles without healing in between will be difficult, especially if they're random. We start off with fighting Emma Inferno, and I happen to lead with Moral. I easily take him out with a critical Surf and take a little bit of damage in the process. The next Kimono girl sends out a Cranidos, to which I use Surf again. The third one sends out a freaking Groudon. I go for a Surf and it does about a third HP. I go for another one, but it outspeeds me and uses a powerful Cross Chop, bringing me down to 33 HP. I'm forced to swap to Meruem, and one Luster Purge finishes the job. The fourth is Alakazam, and I swap over to Meruem, risking a takedown. He nails me with a Drill Peck and a Shadow Punch, bringing me down to his 35 HP before I can use Shadow Claw to bring him down to about the same. I take a gamble and live on 11 HP after a Shadow Punch, allowing me to finish him off. The final Kimono girl brings out a Milotic, and I swap over to Killua, using 2 Thunders to give us the win. With that done, it's time for our final encounters. Well, kind of. We'll get to that in a bit. Inside the World Islands, we get the whole cutscene for the boss legendary, which is always a sight to see. I wish they had more of these in the older games since they're so iconic. Anyway, we get our encounter in and it's a Fion. Pretty useless for our team, but I catch it and name it Naninka. We make our way to the Elite Four, and on the way we catch a Paris named Beidle on Route 27, a Crawdon on Toja Falls named Beetle, a Grovyle named Kite on Route 26, and finally a Nidoran named Rhino in Victory Road. Just like that, we're inside the Indigo Plateau. Now, do you remember what I said in the beginning of the video? I randomize encounters, trainer Pokemon, movesets, and one more special feature. Now is the time to get into that final randomization. Let me give you a hint. Can you see what the differences between these 2 boxes are? Well, one of these boxes have Pokemon that can't evolve, at least through level up. The other box can. So the final randomization is evolution. I figured we could just add our final team member through one of these evolutions, so let's do a quick recap on what we end up getting. Machi evolved into Ninjask, Rhino into Nuzleaf, Blaster into Snorlax, Beidle into Venomoth, Flutter into Relicanth, Colt into Sceptile, Leech into Hariyama, Poduga into Fearow, Kenya into Skuntank, Zeno into Mewtwo, Kite into Torchic, Torchic into Machamp, and Welfine into Altaria. Looking at our options, I figured the best Pokemon were Machamp, Fearow, or Sceptile. I excluded Mewtwo since it's a repeat, and Altaria doesn't have any super useful moves on it at the moment, and TMs are kind of sparse. After some thinking, I settled on Sceptile. We did some training and taught some spare TMs to our team, and this is our final 6. Meruem the Mewtwo with Shadow Claw, Flamethrower, Psycho Cut, and Luster Purge. Colt the Sceptile with X-Scissor, Muddy Water, Earth Power, and Dark Pulse. Moral the Swampert with Dive, Brave Bird, Surf, and Mist Ball. Killua the Electivire with Feint Attack, Focus Punch, Thunder, and Bullet Punch. Baze the Shiny Floatzel with Blizzard, Shadow Sneak, Aqua Jet, and Spark. And finally, Miki the Entei with Heat Wave, Aero Blast, Shadow Ball, and Fire Blast. All at level 45. Without further ado, let's get this Elite Four started. First up is Will, and he leads with a pincer. I send out Meruem first and go for a flamethrower. It's super effective and gives us an instant knockout, letting him send out Staraptor. It has the Intimidate ability, lowering our attack, but it doesn't matter too much as we go for another flamethrower, dealing a little over half health. One more flamethrower does a job as it howls before it fades. Third is Horsey as it goes down to one powerful Luster Purge. Next is Yuxi, and I go for a Shadow Claw. Even though it's super effective, I do ticklish amounts of damage, most likely due to the Intimidate. I try to soften it up some more, but I eventually swap to Cold. It uses Parasong, but I follow it up with a powerful Dark Pulse. The count falls to 2 as it uses a rolling kick, not doing too much. I use one more Dark Pulse and it goes down. His last Pokemon is Jumpluff, and I swap over to Mike as it hits me with a weak Discharge. One Fire Blast connects and we defeat Will. Second is Koga, and he has a Lickitung as his first Pokemon. I use a Flamethrower, dealing half HP and burning him. One more Flamethrower knocks it out as he sends out Wartortle. I go for a Luster Purge as it hits me with a Wood Hammer, having a bit of recoil in the process. One Psycho Cut allows us KO, and he sends out Nidoking. I one-shot it into Oblivion with one Luster Purge, and next up is Love Disc. I don't have any super effective moves on Meruem for this, so I use a Psycho Cut, dealing him about a third of HP left. He heals up with the Citrus Berry, and I finish things off with a Luster Purge. His final Pokemon is left, and it's a Hippopotas? You know what I mean. I use Luster Purge, almost knocking it out. Unfortunately for him, he's holding a Black Sludge, which damages him after a turn, and giving us the win. Third is Bruno, and he leads with a tiny Squirtle. One critical Luster Purge gives us a one-shot, and he sends out a Swampert. As funny as a mirror match would be, I decide against it and keep Meruem in. We trade Luster Purges and Silver wins, but Bruno heals it with a Forest Ore. I go for another one right after he heals, and it gives us a lucky crit, allowing us to finish Swampert off with one more Purge. He sends out a Fiona, and I swap to Killua to one-shot it with a Thunder. Next is Umbreon, and one Focus Punch knocks it out. His last Pokemon is a Pikachu, and I swap over to Cold, taking 2 extreme speeds before one Earth Power one-shots him. Fourth is Karen, and she leads with the Shinx. We use Flamethrower as it goes down with one hit. The same goes to her next Pokemon Chatot. Third out is Miss Magius, and I use a Luster Purge, dealing about half. It returns fire with a weak Double Edge, and we feint her with one Flamethrower. Next is Rhyperior, and I swap over to Cold, hoping for a Muddy Water. We miss our first one and get poisoned as a result from Poison Fang. Eventually, one Muddy Water connects and one-shots the rock. Next is Porygon, and for some reason I always forget what type it is. I swap over to Baze and it hits us with a powerful Hammer Arm as I use Blizzard, doing about a third. I'm forced to swap to Mike as I'm on 43 HP, and I use Fire Blast to knock it down with one hit. Finally, we're up against the champion Lance. I have no idea what Pokemon he could have, so I make sure to lead with our strongest Meruem. He sends out Seaking first, and I go for a Luster Purge, dealing half HP as he hits us back with a Slash. I use a Psycho Cut thinking I can knock it out, but it lives on with a Sliver. Thankfully we don't lose any HP and he heals up with a full restore. I use a Psycho Cut to do some damage and then a Luster Purge to finish things off. He sends out a Chatot, and I want to make it into some KFC with some Flamethrower, but it lives on and decides to let out its own heat back onto me, chucking our HP down to 60. I use a Psycho Cut and a Chatot goes down, but Roserade comes out and I figured I can one-shot it with a Flamethrower, but it does a little under half HP, honestly quite surprising. It hits us back with a payback and Meruem faints, a fitting end for a king. We send out Mike and he uses Dive of all things. I swap over to Killua, expecting it to do weak damage, and it actually chunks me for a decent amount. I swap over to Mike again, and he goes for another dive. I figured I'd risk it and try to just tank a dive. It leaves me on half HP, and then one Fire Blast knocks Roserade out. His next Pokemon, Mankey, goes on to one Air Blast, and he sends out a Metagross, a crazy Pokemon to pull at this stage of the game. One Fire Blast leaves him on a Sliver, and luckily he misses a Rock Slide. I go for a Heat Wave, but he heals up. We repeat this one more time before he runs out of full restores, and one last Heat Wave knocks it out. His final Pokemon is out, and I go for an Aeroblast, dealing a little under half. He returns it with the Mirror Coat, knocking Mike out. I swap over to Colt, thinking I had a Grass-type move, but I didn't, so I ended up using a Dark Pulse, leaving her on yellow HP. He heals up, and I use one more Dark Pulse, but I figured I'd just swap over to Killua. One Thunder knocks it out, and with that, we have beaten Pokemon SoulSilver, but it was randomized. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you have, go ahead and subscribe as well as drop a comment with some suggestions on what to do next. I'll try to upload a whole lot more, but these videos do take a whole lot of time to make, and I don't have a ton of free time, but I'll still try to get these out relatively quick. I know I said I'd get this out on Friday, but I had to do some things, and I had to delay this video a little bit. If you want to see more like this though, check out my channel page. I got 2 solar runs and a shiny Nuzlocke you can watch. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and have a good rest of your day. Good night.